Hi, today I am going to be covering the Pickle Rick challenge from TryHackMe. It's an easy level challenge. It focuses on offensive techniques, offensive um, attack techniques, and the challenge tags suggest that it's a Linux and a web challenge. All the commands and URLs that are used in this workthrough will be supplied in a supporting page on my GitHub page. There's a link in the video description. So with that, let's get started. So first thing that I like to do when I start these challenges is to just look at the questions, because some are slightly different. Not just looking for a user text or a root text, and this is one of those. So the principles are still the same, just because there are some slightly different questions. I kept my general process to be the same, start with enumeration and go from there. So with that in mind, my enumeration started with a port scan. So here is my port scan. As usual, I will usually do an actual port scan just to see what ports are open before I go ahead and do a full port scan. Just saves a bit of time. So in that we can see that we only have the two ports open. It's port 22, which is SSH, and port 80, which has got an HTTP server on it. So once I'd found that port 80 in my port scan, I did a couple of things. First thing I did was to start a FUF scan, because it's really quick and does some just really quick and easy directory scanning. And I also kicked off a GoBuster scan, which is a bit more, I find a bit more flexible in looking for actual files rather than just directories, but it takes a bit longer, so that's why I start them off at the same time. One of the things that I would have seen first off in my FUF scan is the only thing that it turns up is an assets directory. So we'll pretend that my GoBuster scan hasn't finished. I started these scans before I started the video, so there would be no long big wait. And then I moved on to actually looking at the page in a web browser. So we can see here that there's a bit of a sort of repetition of our instructions. Just kind of telling us what we need to do. This is talking about finding these secret ingredients. So the first thing that I will usually do when I'm looking at pages like this is check the source code. So instantly there's a really useful piece of information in the source code, and we have a username. The only thing is, at this point we don't necessarily know where that username is going, but we have a username nonetheless. I also will usually check for both a sitemap, which there is not one here, and a robots.txt file. Try that sitemap again to make sure it's, yeah, it's still nothing, which I knew, but try it all the same. And then a robots.txt file. So usually our robots.txt files will have disallowed entries for search engines. In this case, it's got this really weird little string, which we could maybe, because it's not being entered in as a proper entry, my instinct would maybe be that it's another username or a password. So that's potentially really useful. To test at least we can maybe test this against SSH, but that's kind of moving into foothold, and I'm still in enumeration territory at this point, at least. So going back to the FUF results, there was also an assets directory that we can check for anything useful. In this instance, what we get is a bunch of files. Interestingly, we can see that there are some other picture and image files that were not included in this main page here, because there's only one image on there, and yet we have quite a few here. So it's very possible these are being referenced somewhere else. We have some code. When I was running through this enumeration process prior, I did actually download each of these image files, run strings, and exif tool on each of them, and also bin walk to see if there was any steganography at play, but there isn't anything being hidden, at least not that I could find with those 3 tools. And I used steg hide with the JPEG files, with and without that weird string that we've got here. So as our last piece of enumeration here, while I'm potentially waiting for my GoBuster scan to complete, I also would have done a vulnerability search on Searchploit for the service versions that we have here, for SSH and for HTTP, but there were no interesting leads at that point. So now we can jump over to our GoBuster page, or our GoBuster scan, and actually we can see that we do have some interesting things here. So this demonstrates how I was saying that FUF, it runs really fast, it does quick and dirty directory scanning, it will do file extensions, but I don't find that it's necessarily always that reliable, whereas GoBuster tends to be pretty good with finding these extra file extensions. So we can see that there's our index, but the next one down is an interesting one for us. There's the assets, portal.php, not sure what this is, but at this point we're only getting a 302 and it's redirecting us to login PHP, so clearly that's relying on authenticated access. There's our robots.txt. We've also got the denied PHP, but again, redirecting a 403 service status, and then this odd clue.txt. So we could do one of 2 things at this point. I think probably I would be most interested in this clue.txt from this point, because all I have for sure is a username. So we can jump in and have a look at the clue.txt. Okay, so look around the file system for the other ingredient. So not terribly useful at this particular point in time, because we don't have an ingredient, never mind another ingredient. So from there, I would be looking at getting to the login.php page, checking the source code again, seeing if there's anything useful, but there is not. And at this point, the only 2 other sort of random bits of information that I maybe had were these 2. So this username, which is definitely a username, and then this weird string. So we can try those and actually get logged in, which is great. So we now have a foothold on the system. And it would appear that we've got some kind of basic web shell here. Just to test that theory, we can do a who am I, and it gives us www.data. So yeah, it does look like it is running real commands. Just test out what that is. Yeah, so that does look like that is a real shell interacting. So from here, I tried originally to run netcat and bash reverse shells, and I used the couple of payloads from Payloads All the Things. They did not work. So from there, the next thing for me was to see maybe if there was Python, which there is not, or which Python 3, which there actually is. So we can try setting up a reverse shell for using Python. So I want to run this one here. And then grab my IP address. So I've already set up my listener. So if this is successful, it's hung, so it does look like maybe I have success. If I jump back to my reverse, my listener, then I now have an interactive shell. Cool. So that's a much more secure foothold. At this point, obviously, I'm still looking for a first ingredient. So the very first thing that I would usually do is just check the directory that I've landed in, and we can see that there is our clue, but there is also a super secret pickled ingredient.txt. So reading the contents of that will gave me the first ingredient. I'm not going to do it on the screen because blurring it just becomes a bit complicated. I will put it in the notes in a sort of obfuscated way. So at this point, we already know that maybe one of the other ingredients is lying around the file system somewhere, because that's what we got in the clue.txt. So originally I did try running a find on just the word ingredient across the whole file system, but I wasn't getting an awful lot of joy. So I tried some actual kind of targeted directory enumeration. I usually start with home, and then so we have the two directories there, one for Rick and the kind of built-in one that's usually part of the install. So we'll take a look at the Rick, unlikely to be anything in the Ubuntu, and then we have that second ingredients text file. So great. That again, that if you cat that file out, that will give you the second flag. Again, I'm not about to put it on here, but I will put it in the notes that go with this, which just leaves us with the third ingredient. As I said, the previous find command, I didn't find an awful lot just with the name ingredients. So as is the usual kind of process with these, I was thinking we've moved from foothold to privilege escalation. Probably it's in the root folder. So my first thing that I do every time when I get an interactive shell is to do sudo-l, which tells me if there's any commands I can run with sudo as an admin. And we see there that my admin can run absolutely any command on a system without the input of a password as the sudo user, which is a huge, awful misconfiguration. Great for me, but really bad practice. But effectively it means that I can just run bash, so I can run myself a second level command as sudo, and you can see it's in my command prompt there as root at. If I do who am I am now root, so I can do anything. I have root access from here. If I do as I was suspecting, enumerate out the root home directory, there is a text file there called third.txt, which will give you the third and final ingredient. And that was it for this challenge. It was a neat little challenge. Wasn't much in the way of external tools to use, but it did really encourage me to run those two separate web scan enumeration tools. When you start challenge and you find that there's an HTTP service, I'm going to incorporate that into my methodology going forward. Yeah, it was nice and neat, and this is only my second video that I've done for these, so if you have any feedback, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment. All of the commands, like I said, will be in my supporting GitHub page in the links below. Thanks very much.